Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Experts here on City News 570. I'm joined today by Faisal Susiwala. Faisal is ranked within the top 3 real estate brokers in the world for REMAX and was recently named Canada's top agent. Faisal began his career at the young age of 18 and has been providing outstanding results for over 30 years now, most notably with REMAX Twin City Realty. And he's here to share his thoughts on everything related to the real estate world. Happy New Year, Faisal.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me on, Brock.
Happy to have you back. Listeners, if you're interested in any of the information we discuss over the next hour, please reach out to Faisal. You can start your journey at homeshack.com. You can also call him directly, 519-624-5555, or by email at faisal@homeshack.com. Lots to sift through over the next hour, Faisal. Why don't we jump feet first in? And in your mind, what can we expect over the next couple of months?
Well, we've had the stagnation, we've had a slowdown in activity. People have been sitting on the sidelines, but I think that it has ended. Just judging in the past couple of weeks, we've seen an enormous amount of activity, renewed interest from buyers to enter the market, especially ahead of the announcements that are going to be coming out. Of course, we know January 24th, Bank of Canada will send out their guidance, and it is expected that the rates will pause. We will not see a reduction, I don't feel, but we will not see any rates increasing. Of course, the inflation numbers came out. They're higher than we'd like to see them. But I think everyone has just resolved to the fact that, increasing interest rates is not really going to be the answer at this point. So there's an opportunity out there for buyers, certainly to seriously look at getting into the market before rates start going down. And even if that's on a short-term basis, get a mortgage, even if the rate's a little bit higher, lock in for 1 or 2 years and really start looking at opportunities before you start competing again to buy a home.
I know that we've talked in the past too about the idea that this time, right around now, there might people might be feeling that pinch, especially if it's they're coming to the end of that 5-year term. But things have started to ease up a little bit, haven't they?
They really have. The renewals are starting to come in right now, and we've discussed this in the past that 65% of people who own homes right now will have their renewals coming in the next 12 to 18 months. If you have a renewal today, yes, there will be a pinch, but lock in for a 1 year or 2 year term. We do expect these rates to drop into the low fours, hopefully in the next 18 months. So that will give you a little bit of runway until that point. Of course, it's not easy. We all have to deal with what we're dealing with, but I don't, I would not recommend to people to tie into a long-term mortgage, and try to just weather the storm, create some revenue, rent out a room, create an in-law suite, something to get the revenue in to sustain your payments until such time that the rates are reduced again.
You brought up a couple of key points. That idea of people have to get creative and look at their home, and we've had this discussion before that the idea of your home, it's your castle, but it might also be someone else's saving grace, as you said, putting in an in-law suite, looking at bringing in a renter. Not only are you the bottom line is being impacted for you in a positive way, you're also making an impact in your community as well too. And we know when we look outside right now, we're in the dead of winter. If we can help people out, that's a great way, and I'm glad you brought that up. Talking about being in the dead of winter, normally I would assume that there's a slowdown in construction this time of year. What impact does that have on the market?
Yeah, the slowdown in construction is it's primarily there's no starts of units, and the impact on that is the housing crisis is just increasing. We're not seeing the construction levels that we are expecting. In fact, 5,377 homes were expected to start last year in our region. Less than half of that actually happened, or around half of that, I think it was 56%. $15 million in funding has not been forwarded from the province to our region because we didn't meet the targets that were set out by the province. And we have to look at what was the reason? Is it inflation? Is it high cost of construction? Is it municipal red tape? Where is the disconnect here? And what is the reason behind us not getting the starts? 25,000 applications were made for housing and only 10% of those were approved. So these
Wow.
numbers are just staggering. What is going on? Why are we not getting more approvals? Why are we not getting approvals faster? So all those politicians that are out there listening, do something about it. Stop, making wind and useless comments to get votes and actually do something.
Faisal, if this whole real estate thing doesn't work out, would you ever consider a career in politics?
Oh my goodness, no way.
I
I
put you
don't
on the
think I'd get
spot
the
with that
vote.
one, but you know what? You'd get my vote. I'll tell you that right now.
I
You,
appreciate that.
you talk about the fact that, even though things are a bit stagnant right now, but there's still opportunity out there, isn't there?
Absolutely. In these times lie opportunity. People that are exiting right now, I believe, are making a mistake. Those who are entering right now, it's bold, it's uncomfortable, but it's the right thing to do. And like I said, if you manage your timing right and you manage your payments correctly, and you don't lock yourself into a long-term situation, you're going to not only avoid all those bidding wars and price hikes and lack of inventory issues. You're going to be able to make a thoughtful decision right now and get into the market. I think there's a 3 to 6 month window here where someone can really get into the market at a reasonable price and then enjoy the fruits of their labor and the risk that they're taking over the next 2 to 3 years.
And good for people, as you said, you do have to be a bit of a risk taker, and it's important. Talking about being a risk taker, the other thing I'd gone through the pre-show notes, and we're talking about the idea that we know that the Canada Emergency Business Account that's come to fruition, and we know that the federal government is wanting to start to claw that back. What can you give us some insight as to what that was all about, and what are some concerns that you might have as well?
Well, as of January 18th, so a few days ago, we saw that the forgiveness so if you borrowed $60,000 during COVID, and that was to give relief to those small businesses,
Hmm.
myself included. We didn't know what the situation was going to be. I didn't know if I could make payroll, if there was going to be income, or if we were going to get shut down from showing homes. So I took the first 40,000 and then the second 20,000, so equated to $60,000. Now, last week I paid back $40,000 because 20,000 was forgiven, provided I paid it back by January 18th, which I did.
Right.
I was fortunate to be in a position to pay that money back. But for those of us who were not in a position to pay that money back, they had two choices: either forego the forgivable portion, which is $20,000 on 60,000 and $10,000 on 40,000. So if you borrowed the 40 and didn't take the second 20, you had to give back, you were able to forgive, you were forgiven 10,000. So those folks now who did not pay by January 18th owe the full amount, the full 60,000 or the full 40,000. And as I mentioned on previous shows, and I've been putting out videos about this over the last month and a half, that don't give up the opportunity to get that forgivable portion. Borrow the money, do whatever. Now, if you've made an application to a bank and the loan hasn't been approved yet, as long as you had made the application or shown the effort of making the application prior to January 18th, you are still entitled to that forgiveness once that loan comes in. So there is a little bit of a grace period there. But ultimately, you're better to borrow at a higher rate of interest than to give up the $20,000 forgiveness, because that's a big chunk of money. That's 1/3 of your loan. That's
Yeah.
33% essentially in cost that you've eliminated just by paying it down in time.
Well, and thanks for sharing that. You gave us you know, a personal and professional example of there was a need for it, and now it's come due. But it's important that everybody understand the ins and outs of all of those things as well too. We'll take excuse me. We'll take a quick break. We'll get an update. Actually, we'll just take a quick break right now. When we come back, I'd like to talk with Faisal about avoiding some costly home renovations. You're listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Canada's top real estate broker and author of the book, The Real Deal, billion-dollar real estate broker, Faisal Susiwala. The book continues to be ranked on Amazon's bestseller list as well too. And if you didn't get your copy over the holidays, never fear. Go on to Amazon, pick yourself up a copy as well. If you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can start by going to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or email Faisal@homeshack.com. Faisal, before the break, I mentioned the idea of home renos, and some might be really costly, and you do get a big return, but I'm also thinking some might be costly, and you're just looking at a money pit. What advice have you got for people?
A lot of it is timing. If you're going to put in that, $250,000 backyard improvement with the swimming pool, patios, gazebos, cabanas, if you're planning on selling in a year or two, you're not going to get the return that you would want because the cost of those items have gone up significantly. So, look, if it's for your own enjoyment, that's great, but plan on being there for 5 to 7 years before you start seeing the true return on it. There's no question that those items will make your home far more desirable, but you also want a return on your investment that you've put in there beyond just enjoyment. So that's number one. The swimming pool, you have to really think about timing. Additions. So if you're adding onto your home to increase square footage, the alternative to that might be better to do something internal. So, for example, if you have an attic that's unfinished, there's a great way to increase living space, but also increase square footage. Because
Right.
square footage, we're living in a society where people associate value to size, so that the square footage is greater, the value of the home is going to be greater. So that's another way to add some value within the home without actually putting on an addition, because additions, again, foundations, framing, can be very costly. Adding a garage, again, you have to look at whether or not that's, if you've already got a garage or got a double car garage and you're adding additional garages, again, unless you're planning on being there for a long time, do that for your own enjoyment. The rate of return is not going to be there. And then there's the less sexier items that people
Right.
invest in that don't really get you. So the things you don't really see, like the new windows. If you've already got vinyl windows, but you want to improve the windows from an energy efficiency basis, and the window guys are going to hate me for saying this, it doesn't make a difference. The buyer, today's buyer, is
Right.
not like mom and dad like really opening up taps and flushing toilets and seeing. They're looking at cosmetics, and they love that new car smell, and that's the end of it. So spending the money on upgrading windows, putting on a steel roof, things that you don't really see, putting in that top of the line, dual fan heating system and the ultra quiet air conditioning unit. All of these things are great if you're going to be there for the next 10 years and if they really bother you. But as far as getting a return on that investment, it's unlikely you're going to recoup a lot of that investment. Maintain it, make sure it's
Right.
good, make sure it's functional, make sure it's in good working order, but don't break the bank on those upgrades. And then doing a lot of types of built-ins. I see a lot of nooks, bay areas in kitchens where people will put in this massive like granite table with built-in wooden benches. Now it's all permanent fixtures that they're putting in, but that might not be something that the next buyer appreciates or goes with their decor. And now they have to
Right.
undo that. And then a lot of people have been converting bedrooms as their kids move out or whatnot into closets or spaces that are not multifunctional. They're just turning it into a permanent closet or putting something in there that's again going to be hard to convert back. Removing bedrooms is not a good idea, especially in the
Right.
economy we're in the times we're in, where population growth, even if you're an empty nester, you may have an opportunity to rent out that extra bedroom. So think about what conversions you're doing, and also think about how can it be reconverted back if you're planning on selling the home. Of course, the
And
kitchens
and
and sorry,
okay,
go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry.
Kitchens and
Kitchens and
bathrooms are
bathrooms.
your normal sort of upgrades that you can do, and most of us do. And you can never go wrong with kitchens and bathrooms and flooring and cosmetics. But just be careful on the big ticket items that are not going to get you that return in a small amount of time.
I'll give you a personal example. We a few months ago made the decision we had a gas fireplace. We didn't use it very often. It was on the main floor. We went to have it serviced, and it's 30 odd years old. And basically, the service tech came in and said, you know what, you might want to look at something newer because it might not be up to code. All of those kinds of things. We made the decision as a couple that we would put in a an electric fireplace that I was blown away with what they look like these days. And my thought process was, we plan on being here for, as you were saying, another 5 to 10 years. It serves its purpose for us now, and it didn't break the bank. And also, even if it's not what the next tenant or owner wants, it's still reasonable, and we didn't jump in and make these huge changes. Hopefully, you're going to tell me I did the right thing.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? It checks a box. People say, well, does
Yes.
the home have a fireplace? Yes, it does. And that again checks the box. And what do folks want? They want those little luxury items, amenities. And again, it doesn't break the bank to have it. So great, good investment on your side.
Okay, glad to know. And it's always a good idea to ask. I should ask the expert before I make these decisions, but sometimes you don't always get a chance to do that. To shift gears a little bit, and I know that there's been those stories out there right now, and we're looking at things for the next few minutes at least, from a tenant standpoint, and also being a landlord. These stories of tenants being evicted, and we know that there's always two sides to the story, and I'm sure that you see that because you've been at it for so long. What's your take on what's happening there, Faisal?
We have to look at why are tenants being evicted? What is the reason for it? And it's not always the big bad landlord. Sometimes it's mortgage renewal comes in at 7% and it was at two
Right.
and a half percent, and they simply cannot afford to keep that property, especially with rent control at 2.5% increase. If somebody was paying 1,500 and the cost of their mortgage is $3,000, where there's a $1,500 deficit for that landlord, so they have no choice but to sell that property. So that's a legitimate reason, financial reason to sell. The other is they actually want to move in for themselves
Right.
and use that property because they are downsizing, or they had bought that property with the intent that one day I'll move into this rental property, and it's in the neighborhood that I want to be in. Now, that's a tricky one because landlords are using that to evict tenants and then re-renting the property out at a higher price.
Right.
That's illegal. Don't do it. Make sure you consult with the legal department before you call the landlord tenant people before you do anything like that. If you're not planning on living there, you will be found out. You will be charged. Fines are heavy. It's just not a good thing to do. So honesty is the best policy, of course. Now, if you really want to get out of that property because the tenant isn't paying you enough, there's what's something called cash for keys. So
Okay.
you can offer your tenant a bonus to move out. That could be $1,000. That could be $10,000. I've heard as high as $20,000 to ask that tenant to leave. And the idea behind that is that the landlord then can say, I can go in there, renovate it, sell the property for a higher amount of money than I would get if the tenant was there, and at least recoup some of my cash for keys money that I'm giving to the tenant. So that is a legal way of doing it. But of course, all parties have to agree on that as well. So there's many different ways, but what I'm finding, one of the reasons that landlords are selling is if I'm renting a townhouse and there's another townhouse in the same complex for sale, and I'm the landlord of townhouse A, and my tenant in townhouse A is only paying me $1,500, and the tenant in townhouse B is paying $3,000 a month because
Mm.
it's later tenancy. As a landlord, I might say, well, why don't I sell townhouse A? And that when I sell it, the buyer is probably going to move into it. I'll take
Right.
the money I get from townhouse A and convert it into and reinvest it into townhouse B. And that's another thing. So the rental policies and the limits that that landlords have on what they can do with the rents is causing landlords to look for loopholes or look at different ways of getting out of these rental properties so they can reinvest. Because there's, let's face it, real estate is being used as an investment vehicle.
Hmm.
And if your investment is not giving you the right return, whether it's a stock or a bond or a GIC, you're going to cash out and you're going to try to reinvest it into another vehicle. And that's exactly what landlords are doing with the rental properties. They're saying, I'm not getting enough on this property, I'll sell it and I'll reinvest my money on another one.
And you've been at this game for a while, Faisal. I would think in some situations that if you have owned a rental property and you have had tenants for years and years and years, that you have built up some rapport with them as well. And you there's nothing better than having a great tenant who you don't need to worry about. They pay their bills on time. They're not wrecking the place. You've built up a rapport. They have pride of ownership, even though they're not the owner. And that obviously must play when a landlord is making these decisions, because it is a business, yes, but it's someone's living space.
It's someone's home, and that should never be taken lightly. The challenge is this: when the rents were all at a reasonable rate and the interest rates were lower and renewals were not coming in, if I had to take 10% less because I had a good tenant and I was loyal to them, they were loyal to me, we were good to each other. You know what? I can sustain that, and I would sustain that. I'm happy, and I advise people to sustain, like, for 10% here or there, don't bother your tenant. But the challenge is that when the interest rates are renewing at 7% or 6.5%, and the mortgage payment is literally doubling, now you're at a 50% discount at that rent. So it just becomes a situation of sustainability. How do I sustain this investment? How do I add the extra $1,500? And I've even gone as far as to justify to my landlords that are investor partners to say, look, okay, you're going to take $1,500, you're going to take a hit of $1,500 per month for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Hopefully the rates will come down after that. So it's an $18,000 hit, annual hit. But if there's appreciation in that property over a year or 2 years, then we'll make that money back. So let's not, relocate these tenants to another home and just put everybody through a lot of discomfort in order to make that, because sometimes you can actually get paid to wait. So selling
Yeah.
is not always the right answer. And but it just has to wash out. And again, not everyone is going to be in a position to be able to sustain that negative cash flow, and they have no choice but to sell or to move in themselves because they have to sell the primary residence.
Thanks for that, Faisal, because that puts things in perspective for everybody as well too. We'll take a quick break. We'll get an update from the City News 570 News Center. When we come back, buyers and sellers beware. Stay with us here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today, Canada's top real estate broker and author of the book, The Real Deal, billion-dollar real estate broker, Faisal Susiwala. The book continues. As I said before, it's ranked on Amazon's bestseller list. Again, if you didn't get a copy over the holidays, never too late. Valentine's Day is coming up. Give yourself a present for Valentine's Day. If you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can start by going to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or through email, faisal@homeshack.com. Faisal, I know that there must be things that both buyers and sellers find out when it's way too late. And you've said before, it's important to do your homework, get the facts before you buy. Give us your top list. What are the things that people need to keep in mind when you're either selling or buying? What do they need to know?
HST is a big one. In most contracts, HST is included in the purchase price, and that's in most residential resale homes. In new homes, it's a different story, and there's a whole formula and calculation about that. But when you're buying, let's say, a commercial property, a little industrial unit or a commercial plaza, you must pay HST on your purchase price.
Okay.
If you're a corporation buying it, you can have that as a wash, as a tax credit on your return, or you can do an election at the time of closing on that. But the interesting one is hobby farms. Many
Okay.
times people will go out and buy a 50-acre farm thinking, well, it's got one house and it's got a farm on it. But if the previous owner, the farmer, was farming the land, renting the land out for farming purposes and collecting a rent on it and collecting HST on that, there is a rental component to that.
Yeah.
Now, when you buy that 50 acres, yes, maybe 2 or 3 acres or 5 acres will be exempt from the HST because that's where the residence is, but the
Right.
land that is being farmed is not exempt. So always talk to your lawyer, always talk to your accountant, always ask the seller what was the property previously used for? Were you earning income on it? Were you an HST registrant? Do I need to become a registrant? Am I buying personally or am I buying in a corporation? So these are all great accountant questions to ask. And like anything, you're making such a huge investment. Spend the extra couple of $100, get some consultation before you make those decisions, because you would be surprised. Even many realtors don't know the tax complexities, including myself. So I have my accountant on speed dial, and he hates that, but I still do to ask these questions because the last thing, that's a very costly mistake. To give you an example, $1 million farm could have $130,000 in HST payable on closing. So if you didn't
Wow.
count on
Okay.
that, that's a big ticket item. The other thing is sellers often will sign off on an agreement of purchase and sale, and there's a clause buried in there that said the seller certifies that all the fixtures and appliances in the house are in good working order. And we all assume that everything's working, but
Right.
something like the heating element in the dishwasher doesn't work. Well, then it's not in good working order. Or if there's something to, your fan works intermittently, your exhaust fan works intermittently, or something isn't quite working the way it should, it's always best to either disclose the problem or at minimum say that whatever appliances I'm leaving behind are old and they will be purchased in as is condition, and I'm not warranting it. Because if you say it's all in good working order, well, guess what? If it ain't, you're going to be paying the bill for a new one.
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize that. Um, Leased items versus rented items. Rented
Right.
items are items that are straight rentals. You pay the rent forever. If you don't want the item, you call the supplier, they come and take it out. Leased or conditional sales contracts have a term. So if you're assuming something that is leased, you're in fact taking on the obligation. So a furnace or an air conditioner that was leased to own, you are now going to be the owner of that and you will have to buy that out. So know what amounts you're going to be paying for that. And again, often people find out these things a little bit too late. Privacy is another thing that's coming up a lot. If I photograph your home, Brock, with all your items in there, and you might say,
Mhm.
Faisal, that's fine. I'm not really comfortable with you taking pictures of my house, but I need that to sell my house. Go for
Right.
it. Now, unless you instruct me that you don't want those photos staying on the World Wide Web forever and ever and ever, because the agreement of purchase and sale will state that you're giving me permission to keep this on. So if you don't
Wow.
want, have to state that you want the photos removed from all platforms after the sale of the home. Otherwise, they're going to stay on forever. So there's a lot of little things like that that you have to
Okay.
make sure that you look. And lastly, the which is kind of a big deal, especially now. When you're buying a home, you might be putting a $50,000 deposit on that home. That deposit could stay in the real estate agency's trust account for 4 to 6 months, depending on your
Right.
closing. So now, if you've got $50,000 sitting in a trust account, ask the question, who is getting the interest? Am I getting the interest? Is the broker
Right.
getting the after what amount of interest? So in our contracts, anything that's $50 or less in interest earned in the trust account stays with the brokerage,
Okay.
covers. But if it's in addition to that, then you must state that you want your money stayed in an interest-bearing account, and any surplus interest that is received on those deposits are then refunded to you at closing. And that's a huge amount of money, and a lot of brokerages will have millions and millions of dollars in their trust account, and guess who's getting the interest? The brokerages.
And as you said, you know you've got to do your homework, and if you not we can't know everything, and as you said, you've got your accountant on speed dial. It's important for, if you can't get access to all of this information, are those other people on your to give them a call and say, look, hey, I've got some questions for you, and never be afraid to ask. The worst question is the one you don't ask, because you're just going to assume that this is the way things are. Don't assume those things. Go and figure it out, because you could be missing out. And as you're saying, from the other end of things, hey, the money's just sitting there. Well, if we're collecting interest and nobody knows anything about it, well, it's just going to sit there, right? And that plays into that those morals and values sort of things that we've talked about before as well too. Another term that you had mentioned in the pre-show notes, this idea of exclusive listings or pocket listings. You were saying that as of 2 weeks ago, that is over and done. What's changed? What's happening?
So as of January 3rd, the Canadian Real Estate Association has stated that you can no longer advertise exclusive listings or pocket listings. So those are listings that are not on MLS. And I'm sure speaking to realtors who said, well, it's not on the market, but it is for sale. That's fine. But if it's not on the market and is still for sale, and you see it all over Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, and there's ads being taken out on it, but the agent is not putting it on MLS, well, that's a no-no. It must go on MLS if you're advertising it. Otherwise, it cannot be advertised. So you can have an exclusive listing or a pocket listing, but the minute you advertise it, it must be open to all realtors. It must be on the MLS system. They must cooperate with realtors. This is not being received very well with a lot of commercial agents who like to have
Okay.
pocket listings, saying, well, it's not for sale, but I have an in on it. So, but it restricts them from marketing it. So now you can't basically have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, I'm not going to cooperate with all the other realtor community, but I'm going to have this listing that I'm only going to sell. And if you look at it from a practical perspective, if you are a seller and you're selling your home, Brock, you don't necessarily want your agent to be the only one who procures a client for it, because where's the best value? Where's the competition? How do you know you got the most money? Market value is defined by the number of people that come and see a home, and they decide what the value of your home is. And if you are only giving it to one person and your agent is saying, well, that's all it's worth, Brock, because that's all this guy's willing to pay, and he's my buyer. Well, yeah, you
Mhm.
might save a little bit on commission, but how much did you leave on the table is a big question.
Right. Right.
So I personally don't have an issue with this new policy, because I have never dealt with pocket listings or with exclusive listings, simply for the reason that if you're running a transparent business, if you're working in the best interest of your seller, you want it to go on to the open market. Of course, I have buyers for my listings, but how do I know that that buyer was going to pay the most to my seller, who I am obligated to, under contract, to work in the seller's best interest? I'm not working the seller's best interest when I'm pocketing my listings and only showing it to my own clients.
Good information to know. And I know we've talked about this before too, Faisal, that idea that for you, you are looking at the markets in Mississauga and in Brampton and in Etobicoke, to say, look, hey, we've got some amazing homes here. That's just another 40 minutes. And your tag used to be what? Drive 35 minutes, save 35% or something like that. And the idea is get that view out to as many people as you can.
Absolutely. And you want your, that's what marketing it is.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't need a realtor. You could just tell a few people that your house is for sale.
That's right. Right. You need to be able to go beyond that. Listen, we'll take a final break here on Ask the Experts. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of things, generational wealth, and then Faisal's he's going to be our coach for a little while. Let's just put it that way. You're listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today has been Faisal Susiwala, also known as Canada's top real estate broker. Listeners, if you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can always start by going to homeshack.com. You can call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or through email, faisal@homeshack.com. Before the break, Faisal, I mentioned the idea of generational wealth. How do you create it? How do you maintain it? Why is it important? I'm going to turn everything over to you right now.
Yeah, it's so important to have that mindset that you're not just sort of living for today, you're creating generational wealth. And especially people of our generation need to do that even more so than previous generations or future generations because the opportunities just don't exist for them that did for us. So how do we create
Right.
it? Number one, you bring awareness. You understand that there is a need for financial literacy. There's a need to talk about what your goals are, what your income is, what your expenses are, and how you can put money away to create that and that ongoing cash flow and revenue. So investing your money is very important. Sitting on your cash is not the answer. And a lot of us old school guys think, oh, I just got to sit on cash because cash
Yeah.
is king. Well, cash is actually not king because inflation will eat your money up very, very
Right.
quickly. So I don't care if you buy gold bars because at least it's a commodity that's increasing and hopefully continues to increase. But don't sit on cash because that will get depleted very, very quickly. For young people, I say get a credit card and learn how to use that credit card responsibly, pay it
Right.
off every month. It also gives you an opportunity to build up your credit score. So whether you're going to buy a home or rent a home, if you don't have good credit, you're not buying anything. No one's renting a place to you. And then for people sort of our generation, although we may think we're young, it's really important to have an estate plan, to start thinking along the lines of what ifs. Do you have a roadmap? Do you have that sort of fire drill that God forbid something happens to you today? Are 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 my loved ones going to suffer? Do they know what's going on? Invest in life insurance. It's a tax-free benefit to your survivors. But above all, get good, sound, professional advice. Learn from people who have done, have succeeded, understand. And those are your financial consultants, your lawyers, your accountants, your realtors, people who are in the know and also have seen the challenges with people who haven't actually taken the right steps.
And I think, I mean, you and I are very similar in age, Faisal. I mean, we both hit 29 this year, and
Yes.
but I think we share something. For me, growing up, finances was dad's business, and I don't mean to pigeonhole that, but the idea was I we never had these conversations, and I doubt that he had many conversations with his spouse. It was I don't know how many sleepless nights he would have had, but that was the idea that this was something he looked into and looked after. I try as a the next generation to have open conversations with my kids to say, here's how much is coming in, here's how much is going out, and I hope that our generation and the people that are younger than us are doing that. Are you finding that people are more willing to talk about finances these days?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to share those, but it also gives it's just education for young people that are surrounding us because they have no concept of what an amortization is, what a mortgage payment is, how long it takes to pay stuff, what a term is compared to what an amortization is. So these are all things that are so important to discuss with your family. And especially in Canada, it does not really pay to have debt. So it's better to learn how to pay off your debt.
Good information. We're going to tie in another topic, and it's not on and always an easy one to talk about, but you touched on it just in this last bit. The idea of preparing your beneficiaries on what they are going to receive when you are no longer with us. Again, it's not an easy topic, but it's in your mind and in my mind as well. It's really important because it's peace of mind, and it ties into that generational piece as well too. What are your thoughts?
I can't tell you the number of times that I've had to visit someone's home where someone has passed on and the survivor has no idea, or the kids have no idea what mom and dad had, or what dad had, or what the husband had, or what the wife had. And now we're dealing with navigating not only where are the assets, what assets are there, but more importantly, what were the wishes of the person who passed on? Like, would they have wanted you to just sell everything and enjoy the rest of your life? Or would they have wanted you to keep all those things and continue growing it and having some sort of passive income for the rest of your life and pass it on to other loved ones? And I'll use myself as an example. I call it, I don't want to I don't want to leave my kids with this idea that, oh, dad's gone and I can just blow my money now. So, I've got very clear instructions in my will as to what I want done once I'm gone, what assets should never be sold, what assets can be sold, what assets there are, the people that I've entrusted, who my accountant is, who my lawyer is, who my financial advisor, who handles my portfolios. These are all important things, right down to, you should have spreadsheets or charts or notes that maybe put in a safe somewhere and let your spouse or your loved ones know that this is where it is in case something should happen to me. Otherwise, you're going to get this situation where you come into all this money and you have no idea what to do with it. It's like
Right.
winning a lottery in some instances. And we all know the stats on people who win these large lotteries often end up right back or worse than where they were because they didn't know how to handle the funds that they have in hand and they didn't know how to invest it, or no one guided them. And it's easy to say, well, you get a car and you get a car and you get a car, and all of a sudden you've given up all your money. So it's important. And like I say, I equate it to a fire drill, that if you have this map, say, just in case of emergency, here are
Right.
the processes you need to take to be safe at the end of this drill. And that's exactly what you have to have those conversations. They're extremely uncomfortable, and they're uncomfortable both for the parents and for the kids. Because as a son, I don't really want to go ask my mom and dad, well, how much money do you have in your account, and how many, or what's my share going to be, or what am I going to get? But you know what? I'm sure my parents would not want me fighting with my siblings about, well, I thought that was mine, or I thought this was mine. And it could be something as simple as, fine china, or whatever you may have, a watch or jewelry or something that was sentimental to you. Just outline all of those things before you pass on.
Good idea. And as we said, not an easy conversation, but an important one to have. We've got a couple of minutes, and I know you've been chomping at getting out the information about this rule. And I don't know if I've heard about this one before, the 75-15-10 rule. What do we need to know about that rule, Faisal?
So the 75, 15, 10 rule, it's pretty simple. 75% of your income should go towards your day-to-day expenses. Okay. 15% of your income should be used to actively invest, whether it's stocks, bonds, GICs, real estate, but for future growth. So this is money that you can risk a little bit because it's for future. So that's 15%. Now, the other 10%, you want to put it away in an emergency fund, but get a high interest paying account or an investment that, it's liquid, so you can get your money out immediately. And that's
Right.
for incidentals such as you lost your job or you lost a loved one and you have to take time off, or there's sickness. So all of these things are where that 10%, and let's hope you never have to use it. But if you have to, make sure that you start working on it now so you have at least a 6-month reserve. And you would be surprised at how easy it is to do that if you just pretend like that money was never yours. So
Right.
75% is yours to spend to do whatever you need. The other 25%, 15 goes into investment, 10% goes into your emergency fund. And this will help you grow your wealth and always keep you away from sort of the big bad wolf.
Good information to have. And if you didn't write it down quickly enough, this show gets turned into a podcast, and you can go back and take a look on to go to City News. Do it. You're going to do a little Google search, and you're going to click on the listen button. Scroll down. You'll find us. Faisal and I have a number of our podcasts that are recorded there. Go back through and do your homework, because that's important as well too. Faisal, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Always something new to learn. And I'm going to go home and look at my budget right now.
Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me on, Brock.
And all the best to as we roll into 2024. You always give us really something to think about, and you've given us your time, and we do really appreciate it. That was Faisal Susiwala, Canada's top real estate broker, recently published author of The Real Deal, $1 billion real estate broker. Luckily for us, someone who is willing to share his thoughts on the current real estate market. Big thank you to our technical producer as well, Devin Robertson, pushed all those right buttons today. And thanks to you, listeners, for joining us. You've been listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570.